In the wake of multiple mass shootings across the country, including the 2011 incident in Tucson, we learned recently more people die in Arizona from gunshot wounds than from car accidents. Do you support more gun control, further restrictions on the purchase of weapons? And what do you propose to keep guns out of the hands of the severely mentally ill? Mary Rose Wilcox.
Thank you. This is a serious, serious problem, and it is one of the cornerstones of my campaign. I believe that we need to stop gun violence in the United States, and the proliferation of illegal guns has to stop. There are many, many people who believe as I do, and we have to speak in one voice. When the article came out that you referred to, that more people are shot by guns and killed than automobile accidents in Arizona, that is a shame. I have very many people who I know, mothers and fathers who have lost their sons and daughters to gun violence. One lady was just mortified because the very best friend of one of her sons got in an argument and went and got a gun that was not illegal and killed him. Now, that one boy is shot and one boy's life is ruined. That is not what we should have in our state. I believe very firmly that gun laws needs to be strengthened. We need to make sure that there is identification of everybody who buys them. We need to make sure that gun shows and the gun lobbyists are toned down. One of my opponents, Ruben Gallegos, got a B+ from the NRA. What message does that send? He even brought a gun to work. That sends no kind of message in my district, and I would work against that and work against repressive gun laws that would add to the violence and not help our country at all.
Randy Camacho.
The one thing that I would want to concentrate on are the gun shows. That's where many of the transactions are taking place. And we do have an issue with the proliferation of weapons across the country, as well as in our district. When I've been canvassing the neighborhoods, that's the one thing that people kept telling me, the residents of CD7, that their main concern is crime. I was talking to a gentleman that saw someone get killed right in the intersection where he lives, and he was sharing how an elderly lady was sexually abused across the street as well. So there is a lot of crime that needs to be dealt with, and the proliferation of weapons is a key issue. When we're talking about gunshots, most people are shot in the back. I don't know if you're aware of that. And that's because they're fleeing from gunshots. And I think that just goes to show you how random, or the randomness of these particular crimes. The other thing that I would say is I think we need to reflect when these mass shootings occur, we need to reflect how they are covered. Are we giving these folks that have committed these heinous crimes, are we giving them a platform? There was a gentleman that wrote a manifesto, and that was published nationwide on the media, on the news media, and that's an unfortunate circumstance. So that's something else we need to reflect upon.
Mr. Gallego.
Thank you. I would actually continue on what I've done. I'm the only candidate here that actually chaired a national organization to expand universal background checks. I would continue that, and that's actually what you need to first start. Universal background checks, no matter where you're buying a weapon, whether it's off Craigslist or from your neighbor or from a federal licensed dealer, you know who is supposed to own a weapon, and that's how you have a universal background check. Two, I would continue and ask and push for the assault weapons ban. I know these weapons are very dangerous. They were used against me in Iraq. I carried one. There's no reason private citizens should have these types of weapons. In terms of the SMI community, we need to keep a universal list that can go from state to state so we know who is seriously mentally ill and who should not have access to weapons. We try to do that at the State House through legislation, bipartisan legislation, and we never fully were able to finish it, but I think we should continue that on a national level. Lastly, I would just continue the work that I did. I fought to protect gun-free school zones, something that was a lot of gun activists try to take away. I kept guns off campus. These are the kind of issues I would continue. And then, more for the personal dig, I think it's really, really repellent that someone like Mary Rose Wilcox would bring something that was very scary up. A lot of us felt threatened at the State House. My wife felt threatened at the State House. We had white supremacists leaving us death threats at our house. And of course, I'm one of the most well-trained persons at the State House when it comes. I've been trained by the Marine Corps. I'm going to take every opportunity to protect my family up until I can get to the state troopers. And I'm sorry that Mary Rose has to go that personal, but that just shows how much she has not done in the last 34 years. Thank you.
Jared Maupin.
You know, I'm for universal background checks. I think it's important to know who is purchasing weapons, and I believe it should be required. We have a right to bear arms in this country, but we do not have a right to bear them without regulation. And that's why I feel our focus should be on regulating them. Armor piercing, ammunition, high-capacity clips, semi-automatic weapons don't have a place on the street. But I come from a community, an African-American community, a Latino community, that hasn't always had the right to bear arms in this country. You know, until the passage of the Civil Rights Act, many African-Americans and Latinos, for that matter, under segregation, were, by illegal means, kept from owning weapons to protect their family and their homes, again, as Ruben, my colleague, has said, from white supremacists, from the Klan, from wanton violence against them in their communities. I'm not advocating gun ownership. I do not own a gun. But if you want to own a handgun for the protection of your family, or a rifle for hunting or marksmanship, or any other lawful purpose, I believe you should be able to do that responsibly. I also believe and will push in Congress for insurance for gun owners. And I think before you can acquire that insurance, you should have to have a mental health evaluation and a full criminal background check to make sure you should be in possession of a weapon. We have to regulate and ensure gun ownership, but it is a fantasy if we think we're going to take all of the guns off our streets, so we need to do it safely and efficiently.
Mr. Peñalosa.
I believe in the Second Amendment right to bear arms. I don't own a firearm. The reason why I don't own one is that I just, quite frankly, don't need one. I can live fine the way I am. But let me tell you something. Gun violence has really touched my family. My father, when he served in the United States Marine Corps in Camp Pendleton, California in January of 1978, was shot by one of his own co-workers on the Marine Corps base. And that was one of the first events in our nation, in the state of California, where gun violence was used at work. And I remember seeing my father in the hospital in Camp Pendleton. And it's very traumatic for anyone to see something like that. Just recently, my daughter's a student at University of California, Santa Barbara. And a couple months ago, a young man with a mental illness went on a spree. My daughter's dormitory is not too far from there. And I remember that feeling coming through myself and along with my wife that particular evening. So my motivation is this. While we have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, just like any of the amendments and the rights that we have, there's limitations. There's reasonable limitations. And the first one is universal background checks. I believe people who are mentally ill, that those folks must be reported to the National Security Index database, so when they buy a firearm, they are excluded. Those are reasonable limitations on folks. You buy a firearm, you must have a license to buy that, no matter where you buy it from a neighbor, as Mr. Gallego said, a third party, or at a gun show. Those are reasonable limitations, and once we have that, we'll be fine. And the fourth thing that we need, perhaps in our schools today, is we need an educational program for our children about gun safety and how to act around a firearm. That will prevent deaths of our children.